All right.
Hey,
You're looking live.
we are live. No Josh Sinnott here this week. Has he he explained to me what it was, but I'm not going to I'm not going to get into it. Although I think it has something to do with an auto in the shop.
Yep.
Anyway, we'll have Josh. Will be back next week, but we I wasn't here last week. I was double booked. That was my excuse on it. But I'm back, and we're here to talk this week about again about what's going on in generative AI, what's going on with our products. Anything else we want to talk about, we can talk about. But Josh, yesterday, so for the I used to get all excited about the Apple events that used to Steve Jobs used to do them, and then Tim Cook did them, and they're not as exciting as they used to be. But it was sort of like an event on there. And yesterday, OpenAI, theirs definitely had a different atmosphere. The Apples were like in a big theater, and it was sort of like a big hoopla and giant screens around them, and it was like an event. OpenAI was like, here's a living room, and here's some people sitting on a couch in a living room on there. So definitely a different vibe. I do think it was pretty cool what they announced yesterday, though. And first off, they have a new model. So I guess that in Apple world, they have iOS, and they always make a big announcement about that, or a new version of the Mac operating system and all that. But for OpenAI, it's when they release a new model. Here it was more like new features, but it really is also as a new model name. And it's this thing called GPT-4o. And the O stands for omnimodal, which is and at first it was like I was thinking about, it's like, this doesn't really seem like anything new. They've had the ability to like take a picture of something or upload a picture of something and for it to be able to describe what's in there. And they've had obviously text since the beginning. And then they have also had the ability to dictate into I've used the phone for that, but I haven't used it on the desktop. But they've had those features. But what they did is they have it all basically operating together instead of as separate functions. And it's like, okay, well, why is that important on there? But they, once they started doing the demos of some of the capabilities that it had, it was sort of like, it really sort of dawned on me afterwards what happened yesterday, which was they drew a major line in the sand. I think really put Apple and Google on notice with their voice assistants that OpenAI is now coming for that functionality, and potentially will be that they're going to change the way we use our phones in particular, our desktop computers also, but they're really going to be changing the way we use them as far as having them act as assistants. And I think it's also sort of like not a coincidence that in the last week, Apple made an announcement that they have made a deal with OpenAI where they are going to they're going to have some kind of merge between Siri and ChatGPT as far as having that functionality. So that's not really that big of a surprise. But some of the things that they did in the demonstration yesterday were pretty interesting. One is they were showing the capabilities on the visual side of things. It was able to recognize expressions on a person's face, the user's face. One of the folks that was doing a demonstration took a notepad out and drafted an algebraic equation and asked ChatGPT to help it figure out how to solve for the equation. What was really interesting is not just that it had the capability of doing that, but it had like a very human sounding voice now that was interacting with the person as if you were in a conversation with a real person. It was a little science fiction-y as far as how good it was, because you could not tell if you didn't know. I mean, if you just showed this to somebody and said that this is an an AI, not an actual human being having a conversation with you. You would have thought it was an actual person. Not just the voice sounded good, but there was expression in the voice, there was slang, there was sort of like, it sounded like they've really worked on trying to make it sound conversational. So what it did was also interesting is instead of just saying this is the answer to the equation, it was actually acting more like a math tutor, where it was the person was giving sort of some hints about how the person should do it. And with the camera focused on the equation itself, with the person working on it, was able to give feedback to the person as they were working on solving the equation. I thought it was very interesting. The other demonstration that they did, which I thought, well, they did a couple others. One is not going to be as interesting to people probably watching this stream, which was how they were able to make real-time changes in computer code on there with with the system, which I thought was probably going to, and people that are in that field seem to think that was a pretty exciting capability that was announced. But one thing for immigration lawyers that I thought was really interesting, and Josh and I have already started discussing sort of how this might change functionality in the long run, or even the short run with Gen, depending on how quickly it's available and how good it is real-time translation capabilities. What's really changed is this latency, where in the past, if you've used these translators that recognize voice, it's not that easy to use. You say something, you wait a couple seconds, it gives a reply. It's not in real time. What they did in the demonstration yesterday, though, was immediately light bulbs went off that this could be super helpful if it really actually works as well as what was demonstrated. And it was a live demonstration. It wasn't recorded. But they had one person who was speaking Italian and the other speaking English. They had ChatGPT on the phone in between them. And basically the person would say something in Italian, and then immediately, with no hesitation whatsoever, it translated it without a break. And then the person responded in English, and then it immediately translated it back into Italian on there. That can be something that's a game changer, I think, for people that have to deal with translators in their line of work, where if you have a consultation and you have somebody sitting there who's doing the translating, the problem on it is either they don't do a good job translating, or they kind of have to hesitate and kind of absorb what was said and then spit it out. And it's not a very it's a kind of a strained conversation when you're in that kind of setting. But I could see this being something where you can actually have basically a conversation. It's obviously not as fast as being able to two people speaking the same language, but this is about probably as fast as it's ever going to get if you have to have a voice in between. So that was very cool. And this is all part of this new operating system. The operating system itself, one interesting thing that they did was they rolled out this operating system for free in a limited way for everybody. If you have a free ChatGPT 3.5 account, you now can use this one at least for up to a certain number of tokens, I guess, per month that you get. If you use it too much, they revert you back to the older one. And the nice thing for us is that they announced that this was immediately available to APIs, which means that companies like ours that build software that is accessing GPT-4, that will have access to this, at least part of it. Josh, I think that was it. We don't get all the functionality, but they said they're going to be rolling it out over the next few weeks, all the functionality. What we're waiting to see is whether the quality of the answers in Gen, which is excellent right now with the GPT-4 Turbo, if there's if it appears that the answers are not as strong with GPT-4o, then we aren't going to make a change with respect to the library. One of the things we're exploring is possibly having that functionality available for private GPT. And it is in our roadmap to do a mobile version of our software product. So I think that the yesterday's announcements will have an impact in the probably my guess is later in the summer for our users, but that's something that, and if you use ChatGPT, and we know a lot of people that use our product are also using ChatGPT. So if you are, you should start to play around with this stuff, which I started doing yesterday. The first thing I tried was Spanish Tutor, where I was asking it to read me expressions in Spanish that I can answer, and then have it tell me how I did on there, which I thought was kind of an interesting use of it as well. But there's going to be a million different ones. Anyway, Josh, what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I will confirm our team has been testing. Our developer lead sent us an email shortly, maybe like an hour ago, and basically said so far the results have been on the text output somewhat lower quality than for Turbo in terms of like gen related questions with our own data set. So that's interesting. And I think it's just playing catch up, because it seems like if you optimize a model for video and conversation, there may be certain configurations and settings that would be different than just sort of a pure text input output. I do find, I don't know, it is interesting, like the challenges that they face around simple things like, how do you know when someone, this has probably been one of the biggest challenges probably with, like, I would imagine Siri and some of these other like microphone based like chat offerings, is because, like, how do you know when someone stops talking or starts talking, or like understanding the tone of a specific person's voice. And I guess a lot of that's, I mean, maybe it's easier if you can like actually have a video showing the person talking, and then like the AI would just know, okay, they stopped talking now, so I'll like start phrasing my response. It's
yeah.
like,
no, that is a question. Although it didn't seem like it was screwing. Yesterday, there were several people that were interrupting each other as far as the demonstrators, and ChatGPT seemed to handle that pretty well as far as having more than one voice in the conversation, or more than one human voice in the conversation. It also did something that was new that I didn't appreciate until afterwards, which is you can interrupt it now. Before, you couldn't do that. You had to like say what you're going to say, and then wait on its response, and then say what you're going to say, and then wait on its response. So that is especially if it's sort of like immediately on the wrong track, you can cut it off and say, hey, stop for a second. This is what I mean on there. And that's a lot more natural, which is, so I appreciated that. I don't think people will really understand how useful that is until they start using it.
It's more natural to cut someone off mid-sentence.
I do. I'm good at cutting people off. The impatient people out there.
That was exactly actually what I was thinking about. Because they did that several times. He was just like, oh, no, stop. No, sorry, that's not. And it would be able to respond and stop. And I will say, maybe it is kind of interesting also to think about how like temperature affects, like a temperature setting would affect a translator's like exactness or something. Or maybe if you turn the temperature up, it sort of like gets really, it just like kind of goes on and on and on and just creates a lot of filler. It is interesting to think about the equivalence of like temperature settings to like voice audio output versus text output. I don't know. It's really, really interesting stuff. And I do agree that it can be in the future. I think it will be an integral part of how Gen operates is a voice component. And you mentioned this yesterday, that it was very mobile driven, right? Like it wasn't like they did have the computer for the code aspect of it, like working through that, the developers sort of like software, but the mobile focus seemed to be pretty clear.
One question that there's a guy that I follow that some of you may have heard of, Gary Marcus. I follow him on social media, and he's the generative AI curmudgeon out there. He's a very, very knowledgeable about this space, but he's the skeptic as far as there are some people that are worried about AI like taking over the world and all this. His like thing is that AI is never going to actually work as well as everybody wants it to. So he's always finding like hallucination examples or this and that. And he commented, yesterday, and I thought that was kind of interesting, which was, first off, he said he thought that the new functionality was great, which was good, which was surprising that he gave some praise to OpenAI about how good the voice product seemed to be in the visual product. What I thought was a but what he did say that was sort of what, it was like, well, if ChatGPT was ready with a really new model like 5.0, which they've been talking about for a while, they would have released that. But he said he thinks that they've kind of reached a point where they're not diminishing returns, and they're not seeing the kind of progress that they have been promising. Now, I had always been expecting a 5.0 announcement to happen in June or July. He was skeptical that it was happening at all, but in any case, we have seen, despite what he's saying, the GPT-4, some of these interim models have been fairly substantial improvements in my view. I think for GPT-4 Turbo, we noticed in the quality of the answers we were getting in Gen, a very noticeable difference in improvement when that model came out on there. So I'm not so sure I really care that there's that it has to start, that it's it starts with the number 5 or the number 4. And I also don't think, look, we've only had this technology for a year and a half that's been available. I think they've already made some fairly astounding progress in that period of time on there. I'm not expecting the progress to go quite as fast as others, although it seems to be. But that's so that'll be interesting to see whether we get a new operating system this summer. And I guess the other thing that's kind of interesting, and it sort of raises questions for the future of our product, is whether we picked GPT-4 for the backbone of Gen because it was, and I think it still is, the best language model that's out there. And that is I think that's an open question right now about in a year or two whether we're going to be saying anymore that that's the best one. I think certainly in some of the head-to-head comparisons, Amazon is in this game in a big way with Anthropic, I guess, is where they've invested their money. It's in Anthropic or Perplexity, but both of them are out there. And then, of course, there's Google. Microsoft has taken a stake in a company called Mistral, which is a French company. And so there's a lot of products that are competing in this space. And we, when we're talking about this, it's not as if we don't have the ability to change up which model we're using depending on what's the best at the time. So right now we're excited when these announcements come from OpenAI because that's what we're using, and obviously that's the easiest for us to adapt. But if another product, is performing better and meets our users' needs, we'll switch, or we will do something that we have been discussing as well, which is using different models for different functions depending on what it is. So if one does a better job with summarization, another does a better job with answering questions from the law library, and another does a better job as far as translation and that kind of stuff, then we would use different models for each one of those functions if it suits our needs.
Right. Yeah, I definitely see a future form of Gen where a user can go into their settings and maybe they have a specific kind of model they want to use, and having the capability to do that. I think for the research component, like our proprietary immigration library, we're always going to want to have the most accurate, most highly performing model available. I mean, I think that's always going to be the case. But for some of the other tools, depending on what you're trying to do, there may be one model that's better than the other. So, I think that's where it's going to get kind of interesting, is like maybe there's a model that's best for the summarizing or translating, and then there's another model that's seems to be doing really well for like the really short output. I don't know. It's interesting. I also think one of the limitations we're finding right now with all of the models, specifically with OpenAI, because we use it the most, is the output limitations. We've been talking about this with some of our new drafting tools, and some of the creative technical ways we're getting around those limitations. It seems like the models have a huge context window when you're talking about the amount of data that you can push into the models, but it seems like the limiter, once you try to get something out of them, in terms of how long of a document do you want to generate, how much text do you want out, it seems like, that's where you usually hit the throttle or kind of hit the limit.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is it kind of gets lost in a long answer. I mean, it's pretty good at digesting a lot of information. And now they have these tests as well in these, when they're testing these models where they have the haystack, the needle in a haystack kind of thing, where they'll have a long, a long context window with lots and lots of stuff. And somewhere in there, they'll post something like, like French fries are the best form of potato or something like that on there. And then it'll just be sort of slipped in there, and they will ask they'll ask a question at some point asking what's the best type of potato or whatever, and see if it actually could answer it from the context on there. If it does, and they're finding that is actually getting better and better. But they have, so what we're seeing is the context windows are getting larger and larger as the models are getting there. I think you're right that the answers themselves are not changing as much as sort of the amount of information that they can absorb getting to that point. It should actually help though. I mean, my guess is that that's a problem that they're going to probably be able to solve. We did we did notice that, in the context window limits were one of the reasons why we had to do summarization the way we did, where it takes it takes a little bit of time, because basically what it's doing is it's creating a series of prompts behind the scenes that are breaking a document up into the context windows that it can handle, and then piecing together the summary and then posting it on the back end. So, well, if you ever saw Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the old one from like 1970, there's the Mike TV, where Mike TV is he's being transported from real world into a television set, and they show him kind of like broken up into like a zillion little pieces floating across the sky, and then he's all reassembled in the TV set at the end. It's kind of like what's happening with our summarization. Exactly what's happening with our summarization tool. So
that is the most specific illustration of I've heard in a while.
Well, being taken apart and then reassembled.
No.
So
yeah.
Anyway, so that's what's happening on that. We did have I like to, if we have a chance sometimes to talk about sort of like how we've been using generative AI in sort of real world ways that our law firms been using it, and others have. So, Josh, we had I thought a very interesting use of generative AI this week. We had a partner retreat for Sisk and Susser, where we were doing strategic planning, and that can be a very pleasant or unpleasant experience, depending on whether you like that type of activity or not. But for us, we had we found that GPT-4 is super helpful in that exercise. So we were using it to help us to determine give us a nice long selection of core values to choose from as far as what represented our firm. We used it to help us develop our mission and our vision statement. We used it in quite a few ways, but so that was something that I had a feeling it would be good at that, and it was.
Yeah.
It didn't disappoint.
Absolutely. And for those who are listening, we did not use GPT-4 to give us strategic advice on how to like projecting the law firm's future or anything like that.
But the core values, I mean, that was something really helpful, because I think in a lot of cases, it's easier for people to choose from a list than to come up with something from scratch on there. And so, I had started this exercise actually before the retreat, and I think I had to generate like 50 different words that represented different kinds of values, and to give us some options as sort of what we thought probably were representing. We're most closely representing our firm culture and what our firm stands for. And then once you had that, you could ask for it to, then you could start asking for, we asked it to give it a lot of suggested language. Then we had sort of debates over language on there, but it was a lot easier when we had 10 options to choose from, or whatever the number was ultimately that we had to choose from, versus having to, 6 lawyers agree on, a couple of sentences on there. Would have been an all-day exercise probably if we didn't have that help. So anyway, that was just something I thought was kind of cool that it could do that. It did a pretty good job with that. And that's probably because there's a ton of stuff on strategic planning on the internet that it had to work with. So this was not new. When we were using the EOS approach, which is just it's an approach to strategic planning for law firms that a lot of businesses use. Not just for law firms. It's actually mostly not for law firms, but businesses use that, and it's pretty helpful. Another thing that we had that was we were doing. I don't think you were but we were using actually. I had an old friend who who's been in the immigration world, not in it now, who had some questions about a very complicated question about a family immigration issue. And involving 245K on there. So, Josh, this is a section of the Immigration Act that says that if you that you can get basically 6 months of forgiveness for certain kinds of violations of a non-immigrant status. And it was a really super specific question that we were able on the fly to give to somebody that was going in for an interview in a couple hours. With there, but it sort of reminded us, and Jason had made the comment on there, that it almost does better on super obscure questions that are really, really hard. That's where the product really shines. On the really general stuff, I mean, it does a good job on that too, but it's probably not nearly as valuable to somebody to sort of like, what are the main elements for an L1 visa, as opposed to something really in the minutia. So that was and I did a couple of consultations this week as well, where those were clearly examples on obscure licensing issues for doctors, and different kinds of things like that. So that's one of the one tip I would give to people is that in a lot of cases it's like the more obscure the question, the better. And it is the kind of thing that I like to use it during consultations, and I tell a client a lot of times what I'm doing on there, which is that. I'm doing a little bit of legal research on this particular question while we're speaking, because I want to make sure that I'm giving you your options correctly. But that's something that I wanted to point out today. On Jan, one announcement that we had regarding a major content edition that people will be happy about is Mary Kramer, who writes a wonderful treatise for AILA on criminal immigration law on there. She's really, it's really the best in the space. She just came out with a new edition, and that is now in Gen on there. So super up to date on criminal immigration law. And Mary, thankfully, is still doing new editions of that book. That's in Gen now, as well as a bunch of new practice pointers that we recently added from AILA also. So we are taking advantage of that content partnership to get all that stuff in.
Yeah.
Josh, what say you? Is there I don't know if we want to talk about sort of old school AI products that we've been building, but I was happy to see our retainer portal have a new version of it. That's not really generative AI, but maybe you can talk a little bit about what that product does, just to give people an idea of sort of like food for thought, things that they can do in their practices.
Sure. Yeah, there are a few updates in Gen I'll get to in a minute, but on the retainer app, this has been something our firm has honestly been working on for about 3 or 4 years. I tried it when I was just starting out at the firm and realized very quickly that it's a lot more involved to create a tool that encompasses all of the firm's fee schedules and fee calculations, process types, team members, how to initiate a case, who to send that initiation to. So essentially it's an entire process built around when we start work for a client. So for an we call engagement letters, retainers. We use that sort of all synonymously, but basically whenever we've met with a client, we decide we want to do work for them. Corporate clients sometimes are a little different. They don't always have individual engagement letters, but when we do have individual letters that need to be signed, we basically created this standardized language across the firm that populates certain sections or text based on when something's relevant. So maybe it's a certain type of case. Maybe there's like an add-on that a client can select or want, and so that changes some of the language. Say they want to have something premium processed. For example, that would be something that would be an additional, bit of text in there. So yeah, it's not generative AI in the sense that it's not, we do want those to be pretty much the same every time. Like we don't want variation of the language. But it was super robust, mainly on the, what we call the fee schedules, they're paying monthly and this is the rate and this is how it gets calculated in. And so all that gets passed on to our billing team, which just makes it really, really streamlined for them. So yeah, we're really excited. It's actually part of a much bigger process for the law firm that we're calling the intake process. So basically what we're going to have is a person, as soon as the attorney has identified a client and sent them an engagement letter or confirmed that they are going to send that person an engagement letter, we have someone that they basically pass it off to. And then this intake person essentially carries that entire process all the way to hand off to the paralegal. Here you go. They're paid and signed and ready to go. We find a lot of miscommunication happens during that. I mean, there's just so many inefficiencies. Most case management systems and other systems don't really handle, you have CRM when you're like considering someone, and then you have like case management once like you start the work, but there's not a lot in that sort of in between. And that's essentially what we've built.
One of the things from the lawyer's perspective and the paralegal's perspective, they're going to be working on it. It's the engagement letter. And if there are lawyers that are on this, I don't even think it matters like whether you're immigration law or whichever practice area you're in. It is it's one of the less pleasant. I mean, after hourly billing, this is probably sort of like up there on the list of the things that are kind of the most annoying things about having to work as a lawyer is you have to actually write up an engagement letter at the beginning of each matter. And that is something that, we think is a lot better now from the lawyer's perspective, where all they have to do is answer a handful of questions. And then the engagement letter will automatically build with the firm's language, which means that we get some consistency. Not just, it's the same language every time, but also consistency between lawyers. But we don't want, we want it to be, we don't want to have like the telephone game where one lawyer makes a change and then for the next 10 years that change document is in there every time versus reverting back to what's this one that the firm approves of. But that's something that, as a practice management tip, I would highly suggest is that if each lawyer has their own version of an engagement letter, that's a recipe for some long-term problems that you're going to have when you have no idea what your firm has been contracted to do or what's been said in there. So it's a good exercise for all the lawyers in an office to get together periodically to update it. And now when we make those changes, we're not only making those changes in our standard agreement, but then it goes to the software folks who can then update the app accordingly. Where the fee schedule is also, kind of a pain in the neck, figuring out in each matter, what the fee is for that kind of case, how different expenses are going to be laid out, how the payments are going to be made, and the app figures all of this out for the lawyer as well. So again, it just makes it a process that's a few minutes on the lawyer's end of things, so that it's no longer a big deal for them. So that's something that I look forward to being able to demo for other firms and being able to show that that this is a big efficiency that you can get in your practices.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting just thinking about it. It's like this is probably the one downside of like the flat fee. Like it does make your retainers or your engagement letters a lot more complex from this standpoint, right? If you're just sort of like hourly billing, it's like you have your rate and then it just calculates the number of hours. But this is, with flat fees, you have all the different, and of course, filing fees, etc. So anyway, it's kind of interesting how that kind of shows up on this side of things. So that's the retainer builder. I will say the last thing on that, the one other really cool feature we built was templates. So every attorney can sort of create, we don't allow them to customize the actual language of like sections, but they can modify certain things. And I will say that was also really challenging to sort of get everyone's blessing on, have my clients don't want to see this, or my corporate clients don't want to see this on there, right? They don't want to feel like they're getting billed, for specific line items or something. Like, we want it all to be one lump thing, or, anyway. So there was a lot of templating involved, and that's what really took, honestly, probably like months to a year to like satisfy the requirements for that. But anyway.
But at least with that, if you do have variations for each attorney, and you can build it that way, because at the beginning of the app, it asks you which attorney you are, so that the questions that you're going to be getting and the output you're going to be getting is specified for you. But at least the firm knows what language is, what the differences are, and can see it in all in one place, and can, if depending on the firm, can approve that language or say this is not consistent with the with the firm's policies or whatever. But that's a much better way than just leaving it up to the individual lawyers to figure it out for themselves, or just giving them some 10-year-old template for an engagement letter and saying, work from this.
Yeah. And it's a line. It's a line, right? Like, I mean, obviously the reason you're building something like this is so that something is standardized, right? So you don't want to go so far down the customization route that you're kind of defeating the purpose of doing it at all. But, there are, I would say, this specific example, right, of like a client having a certain way they want their fee schedule to look. We obviously have to address that in the customization option. So when we do have a process, right, for attorneys being able to modify individual retainers. But I think the key was to sort of streamline it, right? So say you have an attorney who's doing like all extraordinary ability work or all H-1B work. It's sort of like they have a template, right, that they know that they have. And it's just like, okay, I just want to be able to change like 5 fields, and I'm just going to, and we're just going to do it. I think that's the sort of templating I'm talking about, where it's like, upload the thing, answer the couple of questions, and then like, boom, here's your, your thing. Here's your engagement letter. So anyway, yeah, that's really exciting. We do have some other exciting things about Gen 2. I know it's getting close to conference season for us. We're really adding features to sort of all, not to the extent of like an OpenAI spring update, but you know what I'm saying? Like for us and our little, market, little niche of the legal space, to focus on releases before the annual conference. So in about 4 weeks, we're basically, again, I don't want to give it all away now and then have nothing to talk about later, but yeah, there will be some new exciting things to discuss. We do plan to start this week giving everyone who's submitted forms about requesting early access to the drafting solution. We have received those. Thank you for reaching out. We are about to give you all access. It's a little bit of a technical, we're kind of doing like a workaround essentially. So by this summer, everything, the drafting and our current product Gen, will be one solution, right? Like when you go and log into Gen, you'll have the drafting, complex drafting capabilities there. For now, in the meantime, we're actually going to have like a separate, almost like a separate interface where your team could go, can go in and access or how we say, create projects, drafting projects. So anyway, it was more of just like figuring out a way to get people in while we were, finalizing some of our design work. Everything functionally works the same. It's just going to be a matter of like where you get to it or where you access it is really the difference. So anyway, we'll be sending out emails this week, giving people credentials and links to get in. If there are any current subscribers on our live stream today who want access to the drafting solution, feel free to reach out to us. I did realize after our last live stream that you can't actually post comments on the live stream here. So if you do have a question, just whatever.
Why can't
it's a little bit annoying. It's the one aspect of StreamYard I'm not a fan of. But essentially, if you do have questions or thoughts or comments about anything we're saying,
get them. I mean, we'll have to figure that out, because I can tell you at the StreamYard that we use for impact litigation, we get comments.
Well, maybe they can comment on the social media platform they're on, but it doesn't like show up here in the sort of like feed. If you're on YouTube,
that's right. So if you want to make comments, you go watch this either through my LinkedIn channel or my Twitter feed. It's on there, and you just add a comment there.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's how you do that. And YouTube also, I think you can add comments there.
Yeah, YouTube actually lets it show up like we're in a live stream kind of feed here, and we can see comments as they're posting in. But for whatever reason, we can't post comments to or from LinkedIn or Twitter. So anyway, at least from this interface,
we'll work on that. See if
we'll figure that out. Always a technical thing. But anyway, I was just going to make a point. Like if you did have a comment or question while we're on this call, just obviously you can reach out to us on the social media of choice and platform of choice. We'll definitely get back to you. So that's really the biggest one, right? Like Draft is this big kind of encompassing product that we've been working on for some time. I601A is the one that's in the queue right now. We're really working on being able to generate some of those letters. Have a lot of interest in that product, or at least that functionality. So obviously we've been spending a lot of time focused on that. Yeah. We're really excited about this automations component. We're calling them quick prompts for now, basically just being able to, again, talking about lawyers using AI. It's like having something where you can upload a document, automatically just see a list of things you can do with that document and then just do the thing versus having to like go through all these different steps. I know we've talked about this quite a lot, but I promise we're getting really close. We've been making some like final tweaks and changes. And again, most of this will be coming out around the time of the conference. So you should be, as we kind of get closer week by week, you'll start to hear a lot more of the particulars of those updates. But we're kind of keeping it close to the chest right now because we're just making some final changes and getting some feedback from some of our beta folks. So just bear with us.
We also have clerks for the summer. So we have like additional projects that we're working on for things that we've had on the on our list of things we want to get done. The one I can mention it. We're just at the beginning stages of this right now, but one of our clerks, we're working on this series of perm prompts on there. So if you do labor certifications in your immigration practice and you work on perms, some of the functionality. This is what we're aiming to do. We haven't built it. We're in the beginning stages of building it, but things like helping you develop a job description for somebody. You might start with something the employer has that has the qualifications and the job duties, and then you upload that, and you're able to query the ONET and the Occupational Outlook Handbook data set, which is downloadable, and then it will pick out for you the occupations that it thinks match most closely that are in ONET or in the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And then the follow-up would be, okay, tell me what the wages are for these different occupations that you pulled up. And the wage data is from Department of Labor is also something that we can add into Gen as an downloadable Excel spreadsheets where it'll tell us what the wage data is. We can ask, we'll be experimenting with uploading resumes for candidates that apply for a position and having it query compare it to the job duties and qualifications that are in the perm application and give us a report on each resume as far as whether they, what they appeared to be lacking or whether they had everything that appeared to match what was in the perm application. So there's like a lot of use cases, and it seems like the paralegals are fairly excited about that. I have a cat who's coming to visit me right now, by the way. But that's that's something that I'm excited about working on with that clerk. And the other project that just got started this week is we got started on this to some extent several months ago with getting all of the ethics rules and the ethics opinions into Gen and then eventually into our sandbox product for other lawyers as well. We have all of the ethics rules in there. We're going to be working on kind of specialized prompts for that. And also we are something to help me with getting permission from all 50 states sets of bar regulators about using their ethics opinions in our product. So that will hopefully be after this, by the time this summer's over, hopefully that's all going to be in there. So those are some of the things we have. I know we have I don't know, at least 3 or 4 clerks that we're going to be having this summer. So a lot of things that we can work on, sort of these little projects that we put aside that are interesting learning experiences for lawyers or lawyers to be.
I think those who are using Gen quite frequently, we'll start to see an improvement in the amount of content, the types of content, and types of like use cases in terms of prompts. I think the content will just get richer and richer throughout the summer because, again, like you said, we have 3 law clerks, 2 interns, an extern, and then we'll have some additional resources for the summer. So anyway, yeah, I think the content aspect of Gen is going to really, really benefit from having these extra folks on board. And I think those who have been using Gen or about to, start using it will start to see maybe sometime like more subtle than not having any content in a specific subspecialty area and then having a lot of content in a subspecialty area, but like just in terms of the vastness of the library and these other more unique use cases, I think we'll see a lot of value there. But
yeah, and we also know our users are coming up with their own use cases that are very interesting, and obviously people are territorial sometimes about what they want to share. But if people have come up with prompts they think are really winners and they want to share with the community, let us know. At some point we will have some kind of board where people can share that information or help each other on better prompting on there. But we'd love to hear from you guys if you have special prompts that you are interested in sharing that we can share with the community.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have anything else for today. I think we had a good live stream. We talked about new OpenAI updates and some of the things happening in Gen with some use cases. So I think it's another live stream in the books, and we covered our ground and look forward to checking in with everybody next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
See everybody.